The writing gave us this. Nick Wright's all-decade team. Nick, you want to talk us through it?
Well, yeah, this is my all-decade first team because the NFL did something different. In years past, they had always done a first and second team all-decade, and it's an important distinction because being first team all-decade was almost a golden ticket to a gold jacket. Over 95% of first team all-decade guys became Hall of Famers. This year, they combined the two teams. So I looked at the NFL's all-decade team, and I decided, what would the first team have been? Some of these, we don't need to go through the offensive linemen. Obviously, Brady, obviously, Peterson. But Shady McCoy beats out Lynch and Gore for the other running back spot. Over 10,000 yards, the most touchdowns in the decade. Gronk's obvious. Julio and AB beat out Larry Fitzgerald and Calvin Johnson. Antonio Brown, we might not like him, but he had the most touchdowns of any receiver this decade by far. Julio had the most yards. Those are the right answers. Defense, it gets a lot more complicated. Look at the D-line. J.J. Watt's a no-brainer for first team. Cam Jordan, Calais Campbell, we had them both on the show this week. They both have 5 Pro Bowls. They both have 3 All-Pros. They're both at 80-plus sacks. I went with Cam, but that's kind of a coin flip. The other big question mark was, you see Luke Kuechly there, Bobby Wagner. These resumes, they were in the same draft class. Kuechly won Defensive Rookie of the Year over Wagner that year. Kuechly as a Defensive Player of the Year, so he edges him out. Everyone else, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. But if there was, Wilds, a first-team all-decade, that's, I believe, what it would have looked like, which means those guys right there should feel pretty good for the most part about their Hall of Fame chances, Wilds.
I love it. I love it. We dug into the stats a little bit more when I saw your list. I was like, wow, Gronk is somehow even better than I realized, and I think he's amazing. 15% of Gronk's catches were touchdown. 15%. He's amazing. He led the entire decade in receiving touchdowns. So when you think back the last decade, don't think about a wide receiver. Think about Gronk in the end zone.
You know, Nick, when I look at your list, I have to look at the running backs, and I love Adrian Peterson. I love LaShawn McCoy. And when I think about Adrian Peterson, there was only a few players in the NFL that when we were on the bench, the offense was on the bench, that I would get up off the bench and go to the sideline and watch. And you actually have 2 running backs that, even though LaShawn McCoy was on my team, that I would watch, of course. But Adrian Peterson was one of those guys that I would get up and just watch him, just watch the things that he was able to do. And when I think about his style, I say he has a punishing style, he has breakaway speed, and we really haven't seen that type of ability since probably Walter Payton. And when you watch Adrian Peterson throughout the year, that style hasn't changed. I watched him a little bit last year, and of course, he probably can't do all the things he used to be able to do early on in this decade, but he still had that punishing style and breakaway speed. And of course, I got to give some props to my boy, LaShawn McCoy. Over 10,000 rushing yards this decade, over 13,000 yards from scrimmage this decade. Impressive resume. I'm glad that he was able to get a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. I love LaShawn McCoy, and I love Adrian Peterson as well.
All right, Brian, good stuff. We are now going to give you some stories to start your morning. So Tom Brady was on the Howard Stern show a little bit earlier this morning. TB12, among other things, said, "I never had a backup plan. I always just envisioned what would happen. And in a lot of ways, it ended up happening." Nick, you buying this?
Oh, I'm buying it, and I absolutely love this quote from Tom Brady. And for young people watching that have a goal in mind, and it is a very lofty goal, I think this is the only way you have any chance of achieving it. I think that if you are trying for ultimate true greatness in any field, you have to already know the end of the story. You have to already know you are getting there, just figuring out the path along the way. So I think Wilds people maybe expected me to take a shot at Brady. Now, in the interview, he admitted smoking weed in high school. He dropped a lot of F-bombs. There are some things that I feel like we can criticize him for. But this quote in particular, Wilds, I love. And I think for young people watching this show or listening to Tom, it's words to live by if you're trying to achieve something truly special, Kevin.
I mean, what a day today is, huh, Brian and Jenna? Nick comes on and says how much he loves Tom Brady. Hey, you know what? Right back at you, buddy. You know what my kid's favorite player is? Patrick Mahomes. And when we're out there, they throw the ball to me, they say, Mahomes, and I've never said it on air, but now if we're being honest, you love Brady. My kids, I have to pretend to be Travis Kelce outside. We also love Mahomes in the Wilds family, so it's a good day for everybody, Brian.
You know, Nick, and I heard what you said. I absolutely disagree. To me, this is the worst quote that you can ever tell any kid to never have a backup plan. Well, what do you mean not to have a backup plan? I want my kids to have a backup plan in case something happens. Because here's the deal. If I didn't have a backup plan, then I wouldn't have went to Villanova. I probably would have went to a prep school, things like that. And sometimes in sports, in general, and really in life, if your first plan doesn't work, then you need to have a backup plan. You have to have something that you can do after that first thing doesn't work in case it doesn't work. And so to me, this is terrible advice for all children across the nation. If you're a child, if you're an adult, have a backup plan just in case your number one plan does not work.
I want to, Nick, before you respond, because I see your mouth is agape. Tom Brady just came out and said one other thing I want to ask you about. He said, I never cared about legacy. Do you buy that, Nick?
That he never cared about it, no. That at this point, he's not concerned with it, yes, because he's already the greatest player and certainly the greatest quarterback ever. This, to me, reeks a bit of rich people saying money's not that important. Well, what about when you were broke? What about when you didn't have it? Like that. And so for Tom Brady, who's got the greatest legacy of anyone in the history of the sport, one could argue, now he's not focused on it. And I do believe Brady was not worried about, quote, tarnishing, unquote, his legacy by going to Tampa. That's a media creation anyway. You should never be able to tarnish your legacy by continuing to play. So I do buy Wilds. It's not his focus now. I don't buy it's something he never cared about.
No, I'm sure he cared about it. Like, once you lose 2 Super Bowls, you don't want to get in that LeBron part where it's like, wow, I've lost more than I've won. You know, I think that's very dangerous legacy-wise. Sorry, we're in a good spot, but then I felt like you took a turn, so I had to take a turn. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I think
No. We did it. We leveled the playing field, Wilds. Go ahead, Bryce. Sorry.
I think athletes are always concerned with their legacy, and you may not be thinking it when you're working out in the off season. You may not think about it towards the end of your career, but I think you're always concerned about the legacy that you leave. You go out there and you want to participate, you want to play at a high level, not just for the accolades, not just to win games, but to be able to say, and I think in Tom Brady's case, to be able to say, I was one of the best ever, or I am the best ever. And I think Tom Brady probably wasn't being 100% truthful if you say he wasn't concerned with his legacy at any point during his career.
That's true.
All right, we got a couple other stories want to fly through this morning. Kevin Garnett is not interested in getting his Timberwolves jersey retired. He said, quote, I don't do business with snakes. Shots fired. This referencing Garnett's beef with Minnesota owner Glenn Taylor. Nick, does this surprise you?
Doesn't surprise me. It makes me a little sad. It makes me a little sad for KG. It makes me a little sad for the great people of the, Minneapolis and the greater Minneapolis area. He's the best player in the history of their franchise. He's the most important player in the history of their franchise. And I understand why KG feels that Glenn Taylor went back on his word when Flip Saunders passed away, that KG was going to be brought into the front office, maybe in some ownership capacity. And KG is a guy who's known to hold grudges. So it doesn't surprise me, but Wilds, it bums me out because KG should have a place within the Timberwolves organization.
I totally agree. I think this is an unmitigated disaster for Glenn Taylor. Whatever you have to do to break bread with KG, sit down and iron this out. This cannot be the way Minnesota moves forward. He played 14 years there. He played 6 years with the Celtics. As a Celtic fan, I'm like, great, KG's here. But, I would love if the Minnesota fans could feel the same way about KG and make it official as Boston fans do, Brian.
You know, one of the things as an athlete, you're always saying that there's no loyalty in sports. And you kind of hope that when you waive your no-trade clause to go back from Brooklyn back to Minnesota, you're saying there actually is some loyalty. I am able to believe what the owner is saying, and he is going to give me a front office and ownership opportunity. And when that doesn't happen, now your faith as an athlete in that man, it just goes out the window. At the end of the day, and I think KG believes this, and I believe it myself, is that every man, woman, really only has a word. And when you go back on your word, I can't trust you. And in that way, that's why KG is kind of explaining it as a snake and things like that. But I kind of understand them. If you go back.
Finally this morning, talking some Jarrett Stidham, our friends over at Fox Bet have Stidham as the odds-on favorite to be the Patriots' Week 1 starting quarterback. And his former quarterbacks coach at Baylor, Kendall Briles, agrees. He said, quote, he is ready for the moment. Brian, I'll send it right back to you quickly. You bind Stidham as the guy to replace Tom Brady.
I think he's the guy that they don't have any other choice to go to. He's the guy that was in the building when Tom Brady was there last. I don't think the Patriots have any other choice. And I also think that Bill Belichick, in the same way that Brady wants to kind of prove that he can win somewhere else, Bill Belichick wants to be able to prove that he's the greatest coach of all time in that he can win without Tom Brady. And to be able to do that, and if they can win with Jarrett Stidham, he will be actually proving that he is the greatest coach of all time. I just don't see it happening.
Nick, my power ranking of dreams, I've moved Cam down to 2. I'm moving Tua up to 1, Stidham at 3. Post-draft, we'll see how it shakes out.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That means number 1 actually is a dream. Number 2 is close to it, and then immediately it turns into a nightmare. But what is a nightmare for you is an absolute dream for me. I love it. No odds have made me happier than when I was able to bet the Cavs at plus 700 to win the title in 2016 after they were down 3-1. Minus money for Stidham to be the Week 1 starter. I love it. It's great. What a wonderful way to end the show. As Tom Brady's dropping F-bombs on Stern, I get to watch Wildes drop F-bombs about Stidham. I love it, Jenna.